It's up here. Don't stand. Here, come on. You can sit up there.
It's great to have you all here. I think we as a group together have made some significant progress over the last month and a half. And I think this really gives us an opportunity this morning to share some of that progress, but also to measure where we are and where we need to go. We have our consultant on board who's going to be introduced to you this morning, CGR out of Rochester. I've been told our website is live, and it's been renewed, and I think it's really in pretty good shape. And our public engagement team has made a lot of progress under City Plan development. And so we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. Let's get to the first item on the agenda, which is the CGR consulting team, and my colleague Kathy will introduce the team, and they'll walk through basically the scope of work that has been worked out between both Consensus and
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to say we have reached agreement, so the contracts are in Joe's possession to be signed, and as soon as we can find Rob, Billy signing them also. So that is a big step, and we're really delighted to have CGR as our consultant in this. I'm just going to introduce Joe, and then he can introduce all his other cohorts in crime here. First of all, the Center for Governmental Research, or lovingly called CGR, it's not a fly-by-night. It's been here since 1915. It was started by George Eastman, so this is a well-renowned organization. I know some of you who are on the selection committee are well aware of the background and everything, but I hope Joe will just give us a little bit of the background too for those people like myself who actually were not participating yet. Joe is a man of many talents. His background, are you still there, Darlene?
Yes, I'm still here. I think somebody else might have joined.
Hello? Hello?
I'm on my way here, but I'm on the phone.
Oh, okay. And before CGR, he was the executive director and deputy for the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. He's a native of Buffalo, but we will not hold him against it, just because we got the golden snowball this year.
You can have it in all
but we're very, very delighted. I'm just going to turn it right over to Joe and introduce the team, and then he's going to actually walk us through. What we did is I just took out an excerpt from the agreement. Okay, it's their phase of thing, and we're really going to be ready to ask any questions you have of Joe or his team.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. Catherine, you said you're delighted to have us here. I think your delight is exceeded only by our delight to be here. One of the things we really pride ourselves on at CGR is being involved in cutting-edge projects, really innovative thinking in communities, and this project certainly checks both of those boxes. Let me give you a little more background on our organization. I'd like to introduce my team members too. And I apologize for anybody that has heard this story, but it'll be a refresher for you. As Catherine said, CGR was founded in 1915 by George Eastman, of Eastman Kodak, of course. Mr. Eastman founded the organization as what was called the Municipal Research Bureau. And you got to remember what was going on at this era in American local government. We were starting to vest local governments in this country, particularly in the Northeast and Midwest, with service responsibilities, governance responsibilities that they'd never had before. And in a lot of cases, certainly in our home community in Rochester, the local government simply didn't have the depth, the sophistication, the capability to deliver those services, and certainly to measure the return on the public's investment. So in Rochester and about 3 dozen other communities across the country, community leaders got together and established what were called municipal research bureaus. And over the course of the 20th century, a lot of those municipal research bureaus kind of fell by the wayside, evolved into obsolescence as local government enhanced its capabilities and sophistication. A handful of them, including CGR fortunately, evolved to become what we are today, which is for all intents and purposes a full-service management consultancy that serves the local municipal sector. We continue to exist as an independent 501c3 nonprofit organization, so it is something that distinguishes us in the space. But having been in business for 99 years, for about the first 95 or 96 of those years working exclusively in New York State, we've really seen the whole gamut of challenges, of opportunities, of restructurings, and it's that broad dashboard of experience that we really bring to every engagement. We've done in probably the last 10 or 12 years more work on local government restructuring, efficiency enhancement, community data management than any other organization in the state of New York. I think, correct me if these numbers are wrong, Scott, but just since 2007, I think we're at 72 or 73 local municipal and school district efficiency projects. Those efficiency projects range everywhere from an internal operational study of one jurisdiction to shared services feasibility studies for 2 or more jurisdictions, to village dissolutions, intermunicipal consolidations, regional projects like this. We did something very similar to this with the 16 county region surrounding Metro Cleveland several years ago. So we've seen efforts at each level of analysis here, and I think it's that experience that that we really bring to every engagement that gives us a broad sense of what the challenges are and also what's possible. As I said, our primary focus areas are the local public sector. We work in the education sector as well with school districts and regional providers, BOCES, educational service centers in the state of Ohio. We do quite a bit of work for nonprofit, community-based organizations and foundations, and we also do work for the business community. The Rochester Business Alliance, we worked for the Buffalo Niagara Partnership in the past, Greater Rochester Enterprise, and so on. We are based in Rochester, and we do about 2/3 of our work in the state of New York. Over the last several years, we've begun doing work very similar to this in neighboring states, and it's very interesting. I think organizationally and we as communities tend to see ourselves as facing really unique challenges here in the state of New York, but the reality is that you go into some of our neighboring states, you go into New Jersey, you go into Massachusetts, you go into Ohio, Pennsylvania, we're asking the same questions. We're facing the same challenges, we're facing the same issues of cost of government, economic competitiveness, brain drain. How can we do it better? How can we do it more effectively? How can we think outside of the box? They're all the same questions. I still remember, I'll just share one quick anecdote with you. My first meeting in the state of New Jersey, which was probably in late 2009, and I started a meeting very similar to this, and I got up in front of that commission, and I started to introduce myself and my team, and the chair of the commission gently put his hand up and said, Dr. Stefko, if I could just stop you right there for a second. Let me just start by saying, we know you guys have done a ton of work in New York State. You've done more work than anybody in New York State. But this is New Jersey. And we do local government dysfunction better than any other state in the country. So I let him go on. And when he was done, I said, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, we've been doing this work in New York State, which is really the epicenter for a lot of those issues, for almost a century. So we had a playful back and forth. But I think that the anecdote is powerful because it shows that what we're facing in this state, what we're facing as communities, particularly upstate, right, are not unique. So in as much as the same questions are being asked, we have a lot that we can learn from other parts of the state, other parts of the Northeast and Midwest, and the fact that we're doing more work in those places, I think, allows us to better serve you and bring better ideas to the table. So you see some of the key areas that we feel we have really deep competency and capabilities that will be able to help move the needle on this project here. And I mentioned the different levels of analysis at which we've worked, from the individual municipality level to the intermunicipal level. The biggest village restructuring in the history of the state of New York was directed by Scott Sittig just down the road in Seneca Falls. The biggest municipal restructuring in the state of New Jersey, which took effect about 17 months ago now in the Princetons was something that I directed from 2010 to 2013, and then the broader kind of multi-county metropolitan area types of studies. Obviously this isn't multi-county, but it rises to that regional level, right? We've worked at that level as well. Before I go into the project objectives, let me just quickly introduce my colleagues who will be helping to manage this project. Scott Sittig is an Associate Director at CGR. Scott's been with us since '07, right? Associate Director, has a lot of our government management work in addition to the work in Seneca Falls. Scott has worked on village issues across the state of New York. He's worked on town and village issues in the state of New York. He's worked on township and borough issues in the state of New Jersey. Currently involved with a police shared services analysis in the Metro Philly area in Pennsylvania. So Scott brings a really deep well of experience to this project. Brian Rulin is actually one of our newer hires at CGR. He joined us earlier this year, the former city finance director in the city of Rochester, and before that, probably 8 or 9 years before that, finance commissioner in the city of Syracuse. So not only does Brian bring us really deep public finance expertise in New York State, but he brings us some real institutional knowledge about what's happening in this community, the key institutions and the key players. So collectively really allowing us to hit the ground running. What I wanted to do, as Catherine suggested, is just briefly walk you through the key project objectives so that we can establish a shared set of expectations, number one, and then number two, briefly overview for us and overview for you in just a couple of minutes the process we're going to use to attack each of these objectives. So very broad brush project objectives. I'll remind everybody that we submitted a formal, fairly thick proposal to the Commission, to the Review Committee. Anybody that hasn't seen that would like to see a copy of that, I'm sure you could let Kathy or Lori know. You can let me know. We'd be happy to get you a copy on that. A little more detail on our organization, all of our staff bios, and we go into greater detail on the project scope and project approach. So the key objectives here, number one, first and foremost, to support you, to provide analytical support as you navigate the next 12, 15, 18 months of evaluating, number one, what you have in place today, number two, what options or challenges that presents, and number three, what alternatives, what the range of options is in comparison to the status quo. Secondly, to develop a really information-rich baseline of data. This is going to be the first phase of the project, which we call our baseline phase, which I'll get into on the next slide. But our job here is to blanket this conversation, blanket the Commission, and blanket the community with objective information, number one. Number two, accessible information. We're not going to be talking to the Commission or to the broader public at the level of financial statements or CAFRs or debt schedules. Those will all be part of our analysis. But our job is to create an information-rich environment in which the Commission and ultimately the community can have a dialogue about where you are and what the options are for moving forward. Thirdly, to introduce to this conversation some best practices. Best practice models that we've seen elsewhere in New York State, best practice models that we've seen elsewhere throughout the country, so that we can seed the conversation here about what's possible. They're doing some fascinating things in King County, Washington, in Washington State, in the Seattle area, right? How do those relate? Is that something we might want to incorporate into the conversation here and evaluate whether it's politically feasible, statutorily feasible? Would it make sense, right? What can we learn by taking off those blinders and looking at other parts of the state, other parts of the country? Fourth, this really gets into the second phase of the project, to define a range of options, to establish a continuum of options. Looking at, first and foremost, how can we enhance our competitiveness, enhance our efficiency by reducing costs or slowing the escalation of costs over time. Secondly, how can we introduce process efficiencies? When we talk about local government efficiency, in a lot of people's minds, right away we go to, well, you're going to save me money, you're going to reduce taxes, right? But from our perspective, efficiency is defined in a couple of different ways. number one, it's defined as cost savings, but number two, there are process efficiencies. Things that might not necessarily save $1, but might make it easier for the end user. Whether that is in terms of economic development, or paying taxes, or filing paperwork, or maintaining records over time, right? So we have dollar and cent savings, and then we have process efficiencies that can make it easier for the end user. So those all become part of this continuum of potential options. And then fifth, and I don't intend this to be last on the list because it really overlays the entire effort. It has to overlay the entire effort to have a robust public engagement effort. We recognize, I think it's great that the Commission has already established a public engagement, public communication subcommittee for this. I think that's absolutely essential. We recognize, certainly from all of our years of doing this, that if we don't catalyze a robust public engagement effort, this process won't go anywhere. We can have some great conversations in this room, but it will breed suspicion outside of this room, it'll breed concern outside of this room, and it'll really be a lost opportunity to engage the broader, to engage the broader community in a robust dialogue about where we are, what we like or don't like about where we are, and what the potential options are for going forward. So let me give you the broad brush stroke about how we are approaching the project. And again, we go into much greater detail in the formal proposal on this. There are two basic components to a project like this from our perspective. The first, as I said before, is what we call our baseline component or our baseline phase. This is really what our team is going to spend the first probably 5 to 6 months really rolling up our sleeves and digging into. And this is for all intents and purposes, a very clinical assessment about what exists. Where are we today? Who's doing what? How much does it cost? How many similarities do we have across all of the units in terms of who's doing what? Where are we spending the most? Where are we spending the least? What kind of geographic and functional overlap do we have between and among service providers? No conclusions come out of that baseline phase. The primary goal, no recommendations come out of the baseline phase. The primary goal of the baseline phase is to establish for everyone in this room and everybody in the broader community of stakeholders a common foundation of information, right? We all come at this process from different perspectives. What's working, what's not working, what's possible, what's feasible, what I'm willing to give up, what somebody else might not be willing to give up. And that's all natural to bring those varying perspectives to the process like this. What we need to do is make sure that before we start to talk about options, that we have a common point of departure. That we can all interpret the numbers differently. We can all think differently about feasibility and options and what's possible and not possible. But we have to establish a shared information base so we can all come back to the same number. So we focus very intensively for the first portion of this study on documenting existing conditions, documenting that baseline component. And in most of our projects, and in this one, we actually carve out the baseline report as a standalone deliverable. Again, no recommendations, no conclusions, no findings. Here's what is. Here's what exists in the community today. Now we use that as our springboard for moving forward. So after we're done with the baseline component, roughly halfway through the project then, about month 5 or 6, we will pivot to our options component. And in the options phase, I would emphasize the first few words under that options bullet. We explore a range of options. We explore a range of options. We're not going to come back to you and say, here it is. Choice A is clear. Take path A. Don't think about anything other than path A. What we're going to do is say, A through G are the options. And there are trade-offs between and among those options. And you all as a commission, in dialogue with the broader community of stakeholders, have to evaluate and weigh those trade-offs, right? Your final report as a commission, your final recommendation to the broader community may be a slice of A, 2 slices of C, nothing from D, and a piece of B. That's typically how a project like this will go. What we need to do, I say this at kickoff meetings for virtually every project. Our job is to make sure that when you as a commission and the broader community ultimately makes a decision, on the path you want to recommend, the path you endorse. It's as informed, as objectively informed a decision as it can possibly be. You all are the ones that are best positioned to evaluate the trade-offs. Our job is to make sure that you're aware of the trade-offs between and among those options, and that you have all the information at your disposal to make the best possible recommendation to include in your final plan. So you see all of the other, when we define this range of potential options, all of the components that we're talking about. We're talking about the two definitions of efficiency that I mentioned earlier. It's about competitiveness. It's about potentially rationalizing some service delivery frameworks. It's about streamlining processes, even if it doesn't save us a dollar. If we can make life easier for the end user, if we can enhance the competitiveness or the efficiency of the region by streamlining process, and of course, reducing cost. In an ideal world, your final plan, your final recommendation will check each of those boxes, right? A couple more slides here that I just want to share with you to kind of establish the context. I don't know that these next 2 or 3 slides will tell you anything that you don't know already, but sometimes I think it's powerful to see it graphically. So, defining the unit of analysis here, we start with the county, of course, and the city. We add in the towns. We add in the villages. We add in the school districts. What we don't have on this map are special districts, but fire districts, things like that would be part of this as well. So this is our regional unit of analysis, if you will. A couple of stage setters then in terms of the breakout of local government expenditures. I have 2002, I'm going to bring 2012 up in just a moment. I will emphasize that at this point we're focused on not the schools, but the general purpose governments. The reason why we have schools in the slide here is because they're part of the data released by the Office of the State Comptroller. So we want to give people a sense of the full universe of the total local government spend here. But you see the breakout there. If you look at those general purpose local governments plus fire districts, we're still talking about 55 or 56% of the overall pie. Would anyone wager a guess as to the total, the aggregate value of that pie in 2002? I've heard a couple $100 million. I heard somebody say $1 billion. $2 billion. That's closer. Yeah, 2.2.
Now, what's in that number?
This is the total spend reported by all of the units, all of the individual units in Onondaga County in 2002. So the total spend in that fiscal year ending 2002.
That includes the schools?
Yes.
Is that budget or local levy?
That's the total budget. So that includes the local levy. That includes state aid that goes to the city of Rochester, to the city school district. It includes federal aid that goes. This is every dollar that's spent, regardless of revenue source.
That's actual spend.
That's actual spend. That's actual reported spend. This isn't out of budget. So the relationship 10 years later, the relationship, the relative relationship of the various categories is pretty much the same, right? It's a bigger pie, but the pieces are carved up roughly the same way. This isn't right, this isn't wrong. This isn't plus, this isn't minus, this is what is, right? This is beginning to establish a starting point for what we're doing. It's the equivalent of about 11%, a little over 11% of the metro area GDP. The metro area defined as the multi-county metro area, not just Onondaga County, so I want to make that clarification.
The slices look proportionally the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is that
Assume kind of the same growth as being applied.
So here you see how each of the units changed over that 10-year period. School districts were up about half. County was up about 34%, city 46%. Towns as a level of government up about a third. Villages up almost 2/3. Fire districts up. Fire districts more than double, but from a much smaller base. There are a number of key drivers. That's a great question. And those key drivers aren't unique to the local governments in Onondaga County. The key drivers are workforce costs. The key drivers are utilities. Key drivers are pension costs in the state of New York that local units don't have control over. The key drivers are capital investments. The challenge is that nothing's gotten cheaper in the last 10 years. Costs tend to continue to go up. And the challenge that we see as we look at regions, again, this isn't unique to Onondaga County, the Syracuse region. The challenge we see as we look really across the Northeast and Midwest is that the costs outstrip the revenue capacity. So those two lines not only do they cross, but the divergence grows over time. And the recession certainly didn't help, right? We continue to see sales taxes, particularly for counties on upstate and especially on the western part of upstate. Sales tax revenues continue to struggle. We see this especially down in the southern tier, where sales tax volatility is really all over the place. Property tax revenue has never really been a recurring source of revenue growth for upstate communities. We talk about the great value of our property relative to other parts of the country, but we also have we don't see the value appreciation that we see in other parts of the country. So the same tax rate applied to a property that's not appreciating in value produces the same amount of money, and each year that goes by, the value of that dollar that gets generated is less. While on the other side of the ledger, pensions aren't getting any cheaper, health insurance isn't getting cheaper, the cost to keep the lights on or fuel plows isn't getting any cheaper.
This slide and the previous slide, they're huge. Those are huge public input tools.
Absolutely.
The visual of them.
I appreciate you raising that point. And we talk in more detail about this in our proposal, but we have found in our experience doing this kind of work that there's huge public engagement value in boiling down the presentation to this kind of level. Now, we need to be sensitive on our end, and we're not losing the complexity, the objectivity, the nuance. These are complex issues, right? I can hand out a comprehensive annual financial statement for virtually any community in Onondaga County, and it'll create a thud when I drop it on the table. You can't engage the broader community at that level of analysis. But what you can do is say, here's what we're doing, here's the dollars that we're spending and where they're going. One of the other graphics that we're actually going to be preparing for the next meeting of this group is one that we allude to in the proposal. For lack of a better, more formal name, we call it our crazy checkerboard. It is essentially a heat map that will show every functional area that all the governments in this county are spending any money. So if a dollar gets spent there, a box shows up. And as you read it across the map, it will show by functional area, number one, how many governments are spending how much in those functional areas. And number two, what is the total county-wide spend across all units of local government. So what we typically see is, a functional area like social services, right? Social services has a very high spend in communities all across New York State. We've heard about Medicaid, we've heard about the cost share between the state and the counties and so on. So Medicaid, social services tends to be one of our highest spend areas in New York State. But we have very few governments spending in that category. Unlike other states, it's really the county's responsibility. So if we're looking at opportunities to think broadly, if we're looking at opportunities to think collaboratively across multiple governmental units, there's really only one player at the table on that functional area. right? So it helps to, that crazy checkerboard matrix helps to reorient us to, number one, where do we have overlap? Where do we have a lot of participants in common functional areas? And number two, how much are we spending across those functional areas? So things that rise to the top are routinely things like, and I say this without looking at your data, but based on experience in other communities, things like public works, things like public safety, parks, recreation, road maintenance, things like that. So one last slide I want to leave you with on, and then I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain any conversation you might want to have on this. I talk about the options phase. This is a graphic that's taken right out of our full proposal to the commission. I want to get you all thinking about kind of a hierarchy of options here. We've presented this as the, as the pyramid. I think some of you actually participated in a webinar that we did, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, Scott? We looked at public safety options and how you navigate public engagement, the challenge of changing public safety services. We presented this as a kind of a horizontal continuum, but it's the same basic concept. We have, from the bottom, informal cooperation, right? This can be in one this can be across departments within the same government. It can be across multiple governments. This takes place every day today across Onondaga County. We have sharing of plows. We have, I have a big road job over here, and you have a big road job in your jurisdiction next week. Can you loan me a rig and a couple of guys this week, and I'll return the favor next week? And we don't need an intermunicipal agreement. That happens in this community every day. I can guarantee it. It happens in every community every day. It's important. That kind of cooperation is important. It's also personality dependent. We have to have the right people in place. It doesn't always have the staying power of a legal contract. So there are pluses and minuses to it. But that's one category. We have formal shared services, equipment, shared information. Typically this is pursuant to an intermunicipal contract, a shared services agreement, a memorandum of agreement. We have shared facilities. We're seeing more and more of these across New York State. We're seeing more of these across the entire Northeast, quite frankly. There was a much greater tendency, if you go back 15 or 20 years, to if I needed a fire station to serve the southern part of my jurisdiction, and you were just below me, and you needed a fire station to serve the northern part of your jurisdiction, we would build our own respective fire departments, and they might only be a half mile or a mile apart from one another. Now we're actually seeing communities have those conversations. The state has actually supported the development of joint facilities in the area of public safety, in the area of public works. So that's another level of collaborative thinking. And as you go further up the hierarchy here, we have formal functional mergers. I will provide police services to you, and you will provide fire services to your neighbor, and we'll merge our municipal courts, trying to capitalize on some of those functional synergies across jurisdictions. We have formal intermunicipal consolidation. These would be examples like what Scott facilitated in Seneca Falls, what I helped to facilitate in Princeton, New Jersey. And then we have regional solutions. And hopefully it's already occurring to everybody in the room and around the table that as you go from the bottom of this pyramid to the top, the implementation challenges grow. The potential return on investment can grow as well, but the implementation challenges grow. So a big part of the conversation as we start to get to options is going to be asking questions like, at the bottom level at different levels here, is the juice worth the squeeze? What's feasible, what's palatable? We want to think outside of the box. We want to make sure that our outside the box thinking is still happening in the universe, in the realm of what's possible, right? What's doable? What can we bring the community along on? You're not going to be able to force, nor do you want to force any of these options onto the community. You want the community and the various municipal, local government units to be willing partners, willing players in the process. But I want you to begin to think about this range of possibilities, because this is how we formulate our options analysis. This is our working time frame. This is what we shared with the proposal review committee several weeks ago. I will stress that this is a working timeline. We told the proposal review committee that strongly suggested, we're prepared to expedite the time frame here. To the extent data are available, we are going to dive into this full speed ahead starting today. And really put the pedal to the metal on data collection. If we can get the baseline done for you in 4 months or 4.5 months or 5 months, we're going to do that rather than waiting until month 5 or 6. Same thing with the options. To the extent that we can expedite the options analysis and begin to get ideas, alternative models into the dialogue in this room and into the broader community of stakeholders, we're going to do that. Not because we want to finish the project and get out of Syracuse as quickly as possible, but because we recognize that every day we're able to do every day we're able to save on the timeline here is another day that we can invest in public engagement. And these are going to be complicated concepts, notwithstanding our attempt to try to distill them down to accessible pieces for the broader community. This is going to be a big investment from a public engagement standpoint. So we want to be able to maximize time for that. So we have developed this to be roughly a 12 to 15 month process. But we're going to, I expect, continually revise that as we go through this process. Meeting with this commission every 4 or 5 weeks is going to be critical to staying on that time frame. So we look forward to those regular conversations. So that is a very high level, and probably, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 minutes, a high level overview of who we are, the approach we're taking to the project, and we would be more than happy to try to answer any questions or entertain any conversation that you might like to have. But again, we're really honored to be here. This is precisely the kind of innovative, community-based project that really excites us at CGR. So we're ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work with all of you.
Joe, very good.
Thank you.
I'd just like to make just a couple of comments. For those people who are involved in the actual proposal process, one of the things was our website, and we jumped a little bit ahead of time, and we announced today our website was up and running. But part of our agreement with CGR is they're going to work with our website people also, because it's absolutely imperative that whenever anybody goes to a website and when they be able to put this data review, that we be able to get into it and manipulate it and everything. So that's one of a little difference than what you read originally on it. We're very excited about this from the standpoint that I think CGR has a really good handle on the process. They've been through it so many times, but I just want to make sure that anybody has any questions anytime, day or night, don't worry, you can ask one of us, we'll get answers for you. We have a brilliant brainstorm in the shower some morning, pick up the telephone and use the email because that's all going to help them. And one of the things the two Marks interested in, when we met with the village mayors and the town supervisors, one of the things that they raised, and they said, we're getting surveys all the time asking for all this information to fill out this thing. One of the things that I can affirm with CGR is that there will be personal contact, okay? So that's one of the things that's our responsibility, is to get who those specific people are, whether it's the mayor or whether it's someone designated by the mayor to work with it, but it's going to be personal contact, and I think that that's important from the standpoint, from when I was hearing, at least from the mayors and the town supervisors, that they've been inundated from, Cornell, Syracuse University, Des Moines, whatever graduate program is something they want to buy. The thesis of the day, and they're trying to work on it all the time. So that was one of the things that I thought was just really great, is that they will spend the time doing that. Anybody that wants to see a copy of the contract really isn't the majority of it's the proposal that's attached to it. But I certainly have copies. I'd be glad to send you on it. And so from that.
That's excellent. Again, any questions? We've got Joe here and his colleagues are here. Please, if you have anything.
Will some of the charts that we saw today be on our website?
Yes.
Yes, we can absolutely put the presentation up on the website. And I suspect we'll be able to get that up pretty quickly.
I think it'd be wonderful because it'll lay a foundation for the public engagement also, where they can see what we saw and see the process.
You know, I'm very curious to understand what has been, you've done a lot of this, obviously. What's been the key misstep that entities such as this team have made in launching and really kind of getting to the finish line of this process?
Two missteps occurred to me. The first one is a process misstep, not engaging the community from day one, waiting until you have an options report to roll it out to the community, and it creates that sense of a fait accompli that you had a group of 20 or 30 people in a room, the doors were closed, you made a decision, now you're trying to shove it down our throats. That's not a recipe for, I mean, look, change, I tell everybody that change is difficult. Change at the community level, change in the local public sector is even more difficult. Public engagement is absolutely essential from the very beginning. So that's the one common process misstep that I see. Fortunately, that doesn't happen in communities that we work with because we harp on the process. We hop on the public engagement element of the process from the very beginning. The other misstep that I tend to see with communities is not necessarily having realistic expectations as they push the ship away from shore, thinking that within 6 months they can change the world. And the reality is that a process like this is very much about putting in place building blocks, building momentum, establishing relationships between and among various parts of the community, so that when the tree does bear fruit, it might be in 3 years, or it might be in 5 years, or it might be further down the road from that. But we're planting seeds here that will grow over time. I remember when we had done a project like this just last year in Northeast Ohio. One of the comments that came up from a committee member, steering committee member at the very first meeting was, well, look, my goal really here is to really twofold. Number one, I want to merge the city of Cleveland with Cuyahoga County. And number two, I want Cuyahoga County to become the primary service delivery service provider for every municipality in the county, essentially putting every municipality out of the service delivery business. Police, public works, clerk, court. How do we do that?
Run.
I'm all ears. So that's an example of how we had to spend a little bit of time with a couple of members of the committee to shape expectations about what is possible. Now that doesn't mean at this point in the process, I would encourage you to take anything off the table, which is why I showed the entire pyramid, from the very informal kind of small ball stuff to the high level, shoot for the moon. If you see an option that to you is the clear slam dunk, let's build analysis around it and help to build a plan to assess the feasibility, the reasonability, the potential impact of that option or of that series of options. But let's be realistic at this point in the process. This is an entire range of opportunities, and I guarantee you there are opportunities here along that entire continuum. So a process misstep and maybe a realism expectations misstep. Two that I would suggest you keep on your radar screen, and we'll certainly do our best to make sure that we are, we may get tripped up on one or the other at either point during the process, but it's our job to make sure that you get up and keep moving forward.
Mark and Mark, do you have questions about the data collection?
No, I think we just wanted to make sure that when you're doing it, you're talking to the key person at each village or town, and we are surveyed. It literally, I got another one today from Nikon. So I mean, we get one every couple months, and it just sits, and they never give it back to us. So we kind of get. So that's the key, is just make sure that you're talking to the right people, and the consistency. And it's the same. And I think I was talking to Kathy earlier about our budget process. I think a lot of people shake their heads when they see $3.2 billion, but I don't think you understand, and that's what I want to get to this group, is understand how we put this budget together and understand how we do what we do. And then I think your eyes will be open. I mean, if I looked at Paul Allen's budget, I'd probably say, or Stickley's budget, go, and they look at mine and go, we all look at it differently. But I think once you're in that process and you're a leader in that community, you go, okay, now I got it. And Sharon, when she saw, I'm not picking on Sharon, when she got 3.2 billion, I was like, and I saw her go, oh my God, it's a huge number. But Pat knows, it's a $1.1 billion budget in the county. How much of it is social services? You know, all these things, we do not have a choice in doing. You know, we went through a merger study with fire districts. And the consultant came out and said, you've got to do it. This is a great idea, merge. We did the next step and said, okay, let's have a financial group look at this. They got done and said, you're not saving a dime.
You know, one of the things.
But you're going to deliver a better service, maybe, but you're not saving any money.
If I could just say one quick thing on the data collection piece. We have, I see the data collection piece and the talking to the right people piece as they can overlap, but from our perspective, from a process standpoint, they're two very different things. So data collection, we've spent the last 4 or 5 days, I think since my first conversation with you, Catherine, already starting to gather the local level budgets. I think we're up to 19 or 20 as of the end of the day yesterday. Most of those are just what we pulled offline, so we're beginning to build our database of the local, local public finance universe here. But on the issue of talking to the right people, that is, from our perspective, that's much more about building relationships with them. And it's something that we're going to do in the first, probably 15 or 20% of the study time frame here. For 2 reasons. Number one, those are the local, many of the people in this room, right? They are the local level leaders. They're the leaders in their communities. That they know what's been tried, what's feasible, what's possible, but for these obstacles that we really need to focus on, right? Every one of those numbers that was up on the screen, there's a story behind every one of those numbers. There's a story behind every one of those numbers. Nobody knows that story better than the leader in each of those, or the leaders in each of those communities. So when we talk about reaching out and talking to the right people, it's for those reasons, less so the data collection reasons. Another thing that we're going to do, and I mentioned this to Catherine in our conversation yesterday or the day before, we're going to leverage the the town association, the village association. We're going to leverage existing organizational infrastructure in town to go in and talk about the process. Introduce ourselves to the group, make sure they know who we are, make sure they know what the timeline and the data collection plan is, and if you have questions, as individuals, as a group, here's how you get in touch with us. It's opening up those lines of communication at the very beginning. We'll work through the commission to make sure that you know who we're reaching out to, and that hopefully you can open some of those doors for us, just from the members that are on the commission. But leveraging all of those organizational vehicles is going to be critically important to making sure that we're talking to the right people.
The meeting that was 2 weeks ago with the village mayors and the town supervisors, what really impacted me in leaving that meeting is I spoke to 2 mayors. One mayor said, you know how much I get paid to do this job? And one mayor said $6,000. And I was in the parking lot, and another mayor came up to me and said, you know how much I get paid to do this job? $4,000. And that made a big impact on me, because those people are doing the jobs on 10 cents an hour in many respects, given the amount of time they have for their job. It just had a very, very heavy impact on me. Any other questions? Yeah.
Not really a question, but a comment. I think that the question that Melanie asked earlier about what the drivers are, the changes on a macro level on the budget, if that could be graphically presented so that you could break out the 2002 numbers and the 2012 numbers by major budget items, so you can see where the growth has happened. And the other thing we haven't really talked about is sort of the sources of the revenue and transfer payments, and how much of those budgets comprise of transfer payments, from federal government, from the state government budget. Because I think, it's great to have it simple. You can't dig in too deeply, but if it's too simple, then it doesn't tell, the whole picture.
Absolutely. I appreciate that point. We have a couple of primary sources of data that we're going to use to get into both sides of the ledger and really peel back not only the expenditure pieces we showed on the slide, but on the revenue side of the ledger, where do the dollars come from? The first is the individual budgets, gathering current year budget for every local jurisdiction, from the county government level on down within Onondaga County. So that's number one. Number two, tapping into the Office of the State Controller's detailed database, which actually provides us at a line item, cost center and line item level of detail on both sides of the ledger in a standard presentation format. So it allows us to aggregate data from all the jurisdictions so that we can answer the question of, how much of it is, not only how much are we spending on a given year and how does it break out by cost center, but where do the dollars come from? How much is the local community bearing of that overall spend? How has that changed over time? We're really fortunate in New York State, now having done this work in several other states. I can tell you that we're extremely fortunate in New York State to have the level of public financial detail and standardization that we have especially through the Office of the State Controller. It's opened up a whole new realm of analysis for efforts like this. You used to have to go to every local jurisdiction and get the budgets, and you're working with PDF or Word files or hard copy files. Now we're at a point where you all can leave this meeting, go to the State Controller's website, download 15 years worth of line item budget data from or actual spending and revenue data from the State Controller's office. It's that easily accessible. So we have multiple sources here that we're going to be using to triangulate to answer those specific questions.
Just how do you plan to assess and present the feasibility measures to the commission so that they can consider?
That is a conversation with the commission, a series of conversations with the commission. That's really, I think, where any commission like this really earns its pay. I know you're all being paid very lucratively for the job you're doing here. This is not only the commission, but also those various groups, the mayors, the town supervisors, and so on, those groups that we'll tap into. Our job is to identify the range of possibilities, to discuss that with the commission, to discuss that with the broader community. As part of the analysis of each of the items on that range of possibilities, it's to have conversations about things like, well, what is politically feasible? It's a lot more difficult to empirically analyze political feasibility. But people who are leaders of the individual communities, people who are around this table, people who are in the broader community of stakeholders, I can assure you that we'll go to the public forum or public forums, especially the one for the options analysis, where we present the range of options, and people won't be quiet. People will tell you what they think makes sense, and more importantly, they'll tell you what they think doesn't make sense. That options public forum, incidentally, is never presented, we never present the options report in final form at that forum, right? And we'll have a huge draft watermark across it, and that's not symbolic. It's because it's in draft form. We're rolling it out to the community for formal feedback. A big part of that feedback is stimulating conversation, stimulating the broader community's conversation with us about what is feasible, what makes sense to you, what are we missing, or what have we put on the range of options that is simply, from your perspective, a non-starter. So all of that gets thrown into the mix, and in all of our years of doing this, I can tell you that unfortunately there's never been a single recommendation that has had the unanimous support of all 500,000-600,000 people in whatever county we happen to be working in, or even all 30 or 40,000 residents of the municipalities that we're working in. So it's a matter of, first of all, documenting those perspectives, those perceptions, and making sure that we have sincere conversations in this room about what's feasible and what's not feasible. So that might sound like I'm skirting the answer to your question, Travis, but that's really how that process works. It's a dialogue. It's an iterative process.
I have to cut this conversation right now.
I'm really good at
No,
talking.
it's really good.
It's great.
Our cars will be towed soon.
Melanie and her committee have done some great work over the last month and a half. Melanie, please give us an update.
Sure. Thank you, Neil. I'm glad to hear that we're on the right track regarding public engagement, because we have very robust discussions around public engagement and ways in which not only we've already begun what I would label the more passive end of public engagement, those meetings that we have already attended, and really how do we look at ensuring that we have collective voices, and ensuring that we can absolutely represent perspective from all of a cross-section of all of Onondaga County. So first, let's start with the website, and a big thank you to Kevin and Travis in particular for really help leading us to the updates of the website. I encourage you, I know that you have all been sent a link. Please take a peek, give us feedback. You know, one of the things I think we're going to learn about this journey is the notion of having flexibility as a core value, and how we work, and knowing that nothing is set in stone. And so we are still in active discussions around how we make the website more engaging, how we collect demographic information, because I think that is critically important. So we're going to be doing some more thinking in our next meeting around that, but please take a peek at it. We even went as detailed to ensure that the photography that's associated on the website is inclusive, because we need everyone to know that, you know, you have a seat at the table in this dialogue. Because if we're going to truly talk about public engagement, then public engagement clearly includes being inclusive. So please give us your feedback. I think that becomes critically important. Let me give you a quick overview in terms of where we've been over the last, between May and certainly what we have teed up for June. In May, there have been 3 presentations, one of which Neil and Kathy have been presented at the towns, villages, and mayors meeting. We've also had other meetings, whether it's been with Focus, Greater Syracuse. In total, in the month of May, we've had 3 engagement opportunities. In excess of about 200 folks we've been able to do some touch points with. The gamut of feedback has been very interesting, from probably cautiously optimistic to please include my voice and my concerns. And I think we have to really tap very hard on that. We talked about how we include and take minutes to ensure that we are capturing all of the data at each of these meetings. That becomes very important. And then how we share that information with the wider public becomes even more important. In May and June, we have 2 meetings set up to date, and certainly more to come. Proposed outreach strategy. One of the things I want you to take a peek at is included in your package, and again, draft will be in common language that we will include, but the committee took lots of time to really look at, are we hitting the mark? Are we hitting the mark in terms of large group meetings, targeted groups, individual organizations? And again, this list is fluid. It will morph, change. Please, again, give us your feedback. Our intention at this point is potentially to have large group meetings, targeted group meetings, and individual organizational meetings, and possibly do it over a period of time, potentially beginning over the summer, potentially. And certainly through the fall. And we will continue to kind of drive these meetings as long as is necessary. And they will be ongoing, and the information certainly will be shared not only with this team, but by our website. And we can even post where we're going to be on our website as well.
Yeah, Melanie, I'd just like to say the presentations that we're doing right now are really who we are, what we're trying to accomplish, what's the process. It's not anything, you know, it's trying to get them into the idea of what's happening, what's going on, and then telling them where we'll be contacting with them in the future. So it's just really the here we are, this is what we're trying to do on that. And it's while these guys are collecting all the data and everything, do we have everything? But we're telling them what's happening, and I think that's really the crucial part. It's just trying to get out so the name gets out there, people know that it's existing, and that the doors, well, it's closed right now, but it's not normally closed or locked, that they can come to any function to.
And is there a specific target list or schedule that we're working to?
Right, that's what we will work over the next, here's the list, the early list just of groupings.
Right.
And then within that, if we haven't sent out the detailed list, we'll certainly get that out to all of you to weigh in on.
Yeah.
We've got a very long list of groups that may fall into these categories. It's probably at least a couple hundred.
Yeah.
They're
But we will share it with this team, because you can have it, and you can put your eyes on it to see whether or not we've missed anyone.
Or if you can facilitate us getting to the groups too.
Well, yes, that's where my question was going. Do you want help from this group?
Oh,
to
absolutely.
identify those? Do you want us to participate?
Yes.
I think it'd be great for all of us to have the opportunity to be in front of the public
Right.
and make a presentation. I think that would be phenomenal, because I think it really shows the commitment of everybody on the commission. So if we can make those kinds of things, matchups happen, I think we're trying to do that.
Absolutely. The answer is yes, yes, and yes. So if you, after we send out the detailed list, if there is an entity in particular that you can help open the door to, absolutely, we would welcome that opportunity. Murph will be helping us with coordinating those meetings. Murph and Warrior will be helping us with those. So we absolutely will take that. Our objective as well is to have larger group meetings as well, because we know that trying to hit many of these organizations may be very time consuming. So some of these we will try to tackle in groups. But again, we need the collective support and expertise from this team. And our objective is really to start laying that out sometime over the summertime. The other piece we know that we owe this team is a little bit more of a deeper dive on, you know, what are the talking points around who we are, what our engagement strategy will be, and ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. So that's another piece we're looking at. And then the final piece that we are looking at relative to some of the strategy is really hearing from some of those entities from a guest speaker's perspective. Those municipalities, those entities that have gotten it right, and those who may not have hit the mark. And what can we learn as a community from them? So stay tuned, we're going to be rounding that out as well. And certainly, I'm sure I can speak for the team, we welcome any voice if you want to come in to our public engagement meeting to provide feedback. Absolutely, everyone's welcome.
And just, on the presentation, we've had some really good feedback on the presentation. And you will never see another fire truck, okay? So that's a promise, okay? But we're working to try to, and some of these slides maybe will be, the dollars spent. That's maybe a great one to put in there. And so if you would like to do these presentations, we really would love to have you, because we'll have a presentation done and, the slideshow done, and you just have to fill it in. So it's anybody can do it. If Neil and I can do it, anybody can do it,
Yeah,
okay?
and we're working on a three-legged stool.
Right, we are working on that too. So anyway, we really would love it, especially if you have a contact. How we got into these were just somebody called up and said, we heard you at TMR, and that was what it was, and said, would you come talk to the Rotary? Will you come talk to Focus? Will you come do this? So that's how we got the initial contacts, but we certainly can have all of your contacts. It would be great, and especially when you know somebody can call and say, hey, we'd like to just do a little presentation, tell us what's happening. This is a great happening in our county. So we're really filling on that one. Okay,
Donna had a question.
Just a couple of observations. One is to think about students who are at the high school level or the early college level, because I think they're a group that sometimes we forget will soon be in many of the seats. They'll be making decisions, hopefully with our recruitment strategies to keep them here. So their voices are important early on, and they have efficiency strategies in a different light with regard to connectivity and social media and other kinds of aspects. The other is, I'm going to make an assumption that while school districts may have a next phase, that it's important, I think, initially, that whether it's superintendents or school districts or school groups be educated in this process from its onset, so that they understand the implications and they understand that this is an important conversation for the entire community, that they don't come into it later on, but that early on somehow. I'm not exactly sure what that might mean, but and then the third part is, especially when you've got that sources of information, you know, as I sit here and I can share with Mark, you know, that you see 50%, but most people won't know that it was the campaign for fiscal equity that was settled during those years, and that during that lawsuit, when Governor Spitzer came in, that the monies that were put into education that probably constitute a part of that, along with pension, health benefits, and other, was because New York State had not been giving its fair share to education. So, you know, so that in other words, that becomes skewed then during, and I'd have to see the sources of that data, but that's difficult to not, when you don't know what may have driven some of those aspects.
It's a story behind all those numbers.
And whether those aspects are made up by large entities that increased exponentially, or small, or a whole aggregate of small entities. That would just be helpful to know. And again, not from a defensive perspective, but from an educating the public perspective as to this is where we are and this is how we got here.
Good, thank you, Don. The last point that I do want to bring up is, and I want to bring it up with this body, is that I think we need to engage someone on the social media front, because, like it or not, it is just the way people communicate, and we have to get very comfortable with that. But I think we also need to be very responsive to that. So one of the things that I want this entity to certainly support is that if we had some resources that we could designate to help us manage this on a monthly basis, and that's probably in the area of anywhere from $400 to $600 potentially a month to help manage this. So something that
I think that's a very valuable investment.
Yeah, just so that, you know, we can respond. So
Yes, when somebody tweets, we have to have somebody,
Tweet back.
we have to have a tweet back, and not 6 months from now. I need it immediately, because that's what they're used to.
And our Facebook.
That would be great.
Whoever manages the Consensus Twitter feed, though, I give credit, we tweeted last night and copied in Consensus, and within, I don't know, a couple hours, it was retweeted, tweeted back, so you're on top of it already. Nice work.
That was Kevin.
Okay,
Kev, good job.
Translation, I need to find out how to.
But that's the type of responsiveness, and, you know, we do want Kevin to sleep, so, you know, but that is what I think we need to demonstrate. And that concludes my report, unless there are any additional questions, or committee, if I missed anything.
Can we just assume that there's an authorization to go forward exploring the expenditure for social media management? You want to call a question, call a vote?
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Do you know how we team that?
Consensus, that's
That's all.
I think the other thing, Kathy, you want to kind of talk to us about a potential meeting schedule going forward.
Everybody laugh now.
Yeah.
So the struggle, attached is the meeting schedule that we talked about at our last meeting, which was the fourth Friday of every month. through October, because the fourth Friday in November is the Friday after Thanksgiving, so clearly that probably will not work. The July 25th, which would technically be our next formal meeting, the staff and team at CGR is not available for that meeting. So I suspect I think what we will end up doing is having the July 25th meeting, if it works for most people, with Mark Olson, Mark Nicoltra, sort of, they would like an opportunity to present on behalf of towns and villages. This is what we do. This is great. This is who we are, and sort of talk about their structures and why it is the way it is at the moment. And then I suspect, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, that there may be a second meeting called prior to the August one for CGR to give some updates, some questions, some going forward, what do we need, engagement.
If we can get that date as soon as possible.
Yes,
get it
Joe and
on
I
this
are-
calendar. That's what we're trying to do.
We're trying to get some regularly scheduled times. I apologize.
Because Joe mentioned every 4 to 5 weeks.
Right.
As a touch point.
Right. Joe, CGR is fine on everything else except for the July 25th. So fortunately, it's early on enough in the process. We probably aren't missing a whole lot from CGR yet at that point. So
It would be ideal though if we don't wait till late August, so
Yeah.
you and I can work out something.
right. So we'll figure it out.
Good. Any questions about those meetings? Open discussion. Are we on the right track, or what are we missing?
Can I just suggest, I think a really effective way to present the data is on a per capita basis. And I hear that, if you look at per capita public expenditures, in the county, we're some of the highest in the country. And I think that's important for people to see that. There's been, there's a lot of school district data out, and there was, Syracuse.com just did you can search every, county, and all I can say is, thank God I don't live in Long Island. People complain about, the elite colleges. It's unbelievable, the difference between downstate and upstate, which is another problem we have. But I think the per capita expenditures, I think, is particularly effective, and engage. We need to engage people. We need to say, look, we have a problem here, and we need to fix it. This is where we are, and this is what it's doing to us. And I don't know how much bad news you want to present, okay? But, the word is that, coming out of what the Federal Reserve calls the Great Recession, we're lagging behind in Central New York. Buffalo's doing better, Albany is doing better, downstate certainly is doing better, and here we are. And the word is that, especially in terms of job creation, some of the real basic issues, and I'm not even, I really don't know why. I don't, understand exactly what's going on there. It seems to me things really are a little bit better around Central New York. Maybe they're a lot better in other areas. I don't know if that becomes part of the discussion. I think that's a difficult thing to get your hands around sometimes.
Well, I think part of all of this is to try and do the best we can to make Central New York be more competitive. I mean, that's a big reason for going forward.
Well, and that's the one thing when I was reading all that, Murph kept giving me all this information, I kept reading it, all the ones that have made some attempt to do something, if all, whether they saved a nickel or not, in those first 3 or 4 years was incidental. All of them showed great economic growth, economic development growth. And that was, I think, which was one of the keys. I mean, and I think, as Joe said before too, it's maybe not that you're saving money, but you're putting in better processes that eventually will keep the escalation from being so great. So,
Joe, what about the per capita? Can you have some of that in that format?
Oh, absolutely. We already have the data in that format too. We kind of start at the aggregate level, and then we'll bring it down to the individual, break it out by jurisdiction. So absolutely, you'll see that on a per capita.
yeah.
And a couple people have touched on this point, Donna, Bill, and Larry. It's the details. I think it's very, very interesting to see the details, and really try to do, and this will be a challenge, to do an apples-to-apples comparison of Onondaga County to other counties within the state, and Onondaga County to other parts of the country. And the mayor touched on this. One glaring comparison is that the county budget is approximately the entirety of the budget is $1.1 billion. That includes everything: state monies, federal monies, pass-throughs. The local levy, that's what the county imposes on its citizens for a property tax, is $148 million. So that is a tremendous difference between the total budget and the local levy. And that's why I think it's going to be and the challenge would be for you folks to do a comparison and say, what are the driving forces within Onondaga County, within the states, within the school districts, the little idiosyncrasies that Donna touched upon. What are the drivers of cost? Is it healthcare? Is it pensions? Is it discretionary spending in our control, or the villages, or the towns? Or are there items beyond our control? And then the next challenge is, well, how do we get control of those issues? So the details will be very interesting and very enlightening, I think.
I think there are a lot that is outside of our control. Frankly, we need to define what those things are, what the obstacles are, and then make that part of our goals.
I happened to hear John Zogby the other night, and the good news is, that the millennials are a very promising generation with regard to their perspective on civic engagement. And I think that this is such an exciting opportunity. The strength of Central New York is that we have tremendous pride in the traditions and the structures that were probably created decades ago. I think the challenge is we have tremendous polarization and embedded thinking that those systems would continue to work for decades into the future. And I think that the education of the community, I sat one time through a workshop with Joel Delmonico, and they showed about brainstorming, and they illustrated it time and time again that it wasn't the first 3 ideas that absolutely were the best ideas. It was probably idea number 10 or 12 or 14, but that most people aren't patient enough in the process to work through looking at the seriousness of idea 10, 12, or 14, or 27. And I think that's really what we're up against, is a marathon rather than a sprint, is that how do we educate the public, but also work through what are the types of changes that would truly make this region, stand out. Because you're right, I think other areas that have grown out of those old paradigms have grown out of it because they realize those structures will not last for sustainability. They sustained us, though, for decades, so that's all people know. And people will always hang on to what they believe is what got them to where they are today. We have to somehow educate them into what will get them to the next 5 decades or 10 decades, and with sustainability. I think that's the challenge we have.
I think that's very important. And I think the other thing is trust.
You're right.
Okay, I do not want to end this, but if you are parked in the parking lot next to Lincoln Center here, we start ticketing at about 9:15. $25. I know I paid a lot over my lifetime on it. And I know the city needs support, but we don't have to be part of that support right now. So,
Can I just say, Donna brought up an amazing point about our young people and the voice of our young people. And I know that we'll identify methods of engaging them in a larger conversation. And I know that we've established this body. But is there a way or a process or a mechanism whereby we can get that voice around this too?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Good idea. Okay, great. Yeah.
And how is the question, but to get that voice right here, right now.
Because whatever we do is for them in the end.
Absolutely.
And to have them to understand and have a voice in it, I think would be really good.
Absolutely.
Send us recommendations, if anybody has recommended.
Yes, if you think of that person, who would be a couple of people that would sit around this table with us, please let us know. Let us know.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah, we're
certainly.
thinking an OCC student perhaps.
Uh-huh.
you
A
know.
cross-section of students from the various regions of the county and city. The other, I would think of, and Melanie's familiar with this, SRC because of their scholarship. We have a think tank of about 50 or more STEM scholars, and they're meeting on a regular basis, at least 2 or 3 times annually. That's a group that comes from all areas, every high school in this region, and I think we should tap into that group, just for what they're thinking, you know. They're the engineers and the chemical and mechanical and systems and nuclear engineers of the future, so that would be a
Don't
group.
forget the mathematicians.
The mathematicians, absolutely.
And at the very least, we should ask if we could go to one of their meetings, you know, and be a part, just to present what we're doing and hear their thoughts.
I forgot to let the SOCs know.
Yeah, or just that high school student who may decide they want a vocation as a different option as well, and how do we engage all of those voices, right?
Right.
Excellent.
Well, thank you all very, very much for taking your time, and Joe and his colleagues, thank you for
We're excited.
enlightening the presentation for us.
Right.
Have a good day.
And